Yeah. I want to bring it back to this issue of the poetry and structure of the Quran, because I have read parts of it. What sticks in my mind is the second book, and I think it's got about 284 verses in it. Yeah. 86. I apologise. When I read it, I see no poetry in there at all. It is a really, really awful read. It doesn't have any structure. It seems to be a vague cut and paste and putting things in. Now, this is the point I'm making. Are you saying that in Arabic it has some greater sort of like poetic effect than it does when it's translated?
Yeah, of course. That's what we're saying.
Do you speak Arabic?
I could read and write Arabic, and I've done basic grammar. Yeah.
You can't speak Arabic?
No, I can't colloquialize Arabic, no.
Right. So, can you speak it or not?
No, I can't.
Right. Okay. Can you read it?
Yes, I can read and write and understand some grammar.
Right. Okay.
Now, why doesn't the book transcend the limitations of language so that it isn't an arduous read in every other language besides Arabic?
Oh, in fairness, that's a good question. In fairness, there are some very good translations out there at the moment. I'll recommend you one. It's actually a new translation by Oxford Publishing. It's Oxford University Press. It's by Professor Abdel Halim.
If you could send me a link to that, I would appreciate it. The Quran is one of the few holy books I haven't read, sure. And I would like to read it if it's going to be halfway decent. Unfortunately, I entered into reading the Bhagavad Gita with a completely open mind, having once had a love for Hindu art and Eastern philosophy, and I was sadly deeply disappointed by the Gita, much as I was with the Bible. I'm inclined to believe that I will probably be disappointed with the Quran too.
Yeah, and if you do supply that link, as I say, when this video is subsequently posted on YouTube, we will include an annotation that will send people to that page. Sure. Please feel free to do so. I've noticed that we've overrun a little bit. We've got one last caller as well take, and I think that will probably be the last one that we do. Majestical, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Hi, how can we help you?
I would like to ask Andreas about the two branches of Islam. How were they formed? I was told a story in my humanities class of two brothers that were fighting, and that eventually led to the separation into the two branches. I want to ask you because that was actually quite confusing for me.
Hamza.
Someone taught you that in humanities? That's terrible. I'm assuming you're talking about the Sunni and Shia Islam.
Yes. Okay,
cool. The Sunni and Shia Islam in origin was a political dispute. That was the view. There was a view about who take the succession of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and peace be upon him. So a minority party of people, which are the Shia, they said that basically it should have been Ali, one of the companions of the Prophet, and it should go down the family of the Prophet. Whereas the mainstream orthodoxy says that no, it could be basically anyone who's righteous. And from that, then it developed a load of theological crap, basically, yeah, throughout the ages. You had certain things coming out that wasn't in line with Islamic tradition. So that's the basic view.
Again, dealing with that issue, Hamza, I mean, I'm sure you asked this question, and we've touched upon it earlier as well. You have a divinely written book, and okay, I accept your argument so far as science are concerned. The Quran is not supposed to be a science textbook, but surely it would lay down sufficient instructions so that there wouldn't have been this split.
And I have one more point about that.
Yeah, this is the interesting thing about human agency. You know, for instance, we have the basic laws of thou shalt not kill. We know we shouldn't do it, but people still kill. We have things about robbery. We have intricate laws in UK secular statute law. And we even have tools of interpretation. We have the mischief rule, the golden rule, the little rule, the purposive rule. And if you study law, these are tools of interpretation to extract statute. So the point is, we have law everywhere, and it's very detailed everywhere, but sometimes people just don't listen to it. I mean, that's
careful where you're going here. I have studied law. Aaron.
Yeah. Okay. Again, if we're looking for something that is going to imply some kind of impetus to believe, it needs to be verifiable. Now, when I mentioned that the reason that I did not believe the Quran was because it's based on Bronze Age mythology of things we know did not happen. Your associate Adnan tried to tell me that the flood, the Great Flood, was not in the Quran, and then he did a subsequent video in which he's clarified that there's a flood in there, but it wasn't the Great Flood.
Yes.
Yeah. Have you corrected him on that?
Well, he corrected himself. He said it wasn't a great flood in the first place anyway. He said it's a local flood. He said it was a local flood.
A local flood.
Yeah.
From which there were waves the size of mountains, and where you had to have two of every kind, and where there would be no survivors even on the highest mountains, and where every unbeliever was going to be killed, and that the survivors would all be descended from Noah. But it's only a local flood.
Because the argument is that civilization at that time, because the time between Adam and Noah was relatively short, and we're saying the civilization was local, it wasn't global. That's the argument here.
Waves the size of mountains, and two of every kind.
And it also says that the ark was deposited on top of a mountain when the flood subsided.
Yes.
A local flood did that?
Well, a local flood, what we're saying, for example, the tsunami, you could have huge waves, for instance, and it's still a local flood. It doesn't become global, does it?
Okay, I don't mean to come across as churlish, but I think fine. you need to brush up on your hydrodynamics. I don't think that any local flood that remains local could deposit a ship of that size on top of a mountain. I mean, there's a gentleman on YouTube who replicated. He's a Christian scholar, and he replicated Noah's flood in his backyard using only a garden hose. And I really think that you ought to get together with him and compare notes.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, but see, this is the interesting thing. See, you're forgetting a reality here that, you see, if it's an act of God, then essentially from a ontological perspective, we would say that this is possible. Do you see?
No, it's not possible.
Basically do anything.
That's the problem. Miracles are impossible by definition.
Well, your definition. Yes, your definition.
No, your definition. Miracles.
Let me give you my definition. Let me give you my definition.
This is not a matter of. This is not an existential question. This is not a philosophical question. This is going by definition. Look it up. Miracle is not possible because it is in defiance or changes or ignores the laws of physics. It's something that can't happen and happens anyway. It is impossible by definition.
No, the definitions that we have is that, in a summary, a miracle is an event that lies outside the productive capacity of nature. That's a more.
Can you show me a definition? Can you show me a dictionary that agrees with you? I can show you a whole bunch that don't. But if you can show me one that does.
That's because it's a philosophical question, obviously.
It's not a philosophical question.
Well, if it's about definitions, of course it is, Aaron.
No, it's
a definition, and it's not a philosophy.
We had to go through this, I think, on the last two shows. I'm terribly sorry.
Sorry.
The definition of a word is not a philosophical argument.
It's a logical argument.
You can look it up in a dictionary, or dictionaries.
Yes, there is a right and wrong answer.
It is not a philosophical point. A definition is a definition.
Is your definition coherent?
Your problem is this, Hamza. Yep. If you are going to start using words in a way that we do not understand them, that is to say, in a way that it goes contrary to their dictionary definition, then you have to explain in what way you are using those words. Otherwise, conversation is futile. And when I say futile, for example, I could say what I mean by futile is sunshine. You see how, conversation would be pointless otherwise.
And Hamza, I have to tell you.
So if you are using miracle in a different sense, then define it.
Let's give him a chance to respond before Aaron. Let him respond, please.
Okay.
When I spoke about the linguistics of the Quran, I mentioned and detailed what we meant by miracle. We didn't say that it was breaking of natural law, because that's an incoherent description. I even mentioned that specifically. The reason it's incoherent, because you can have an incoherent and a coherent definition. That's philosophy. It's logic. So the point is that it's an incoherent definition is because natural laws are just inductive generalizations of patterns we perceive in the universe. So if something changes the pattern, it doesn't mean it's a miracle per se. Maybe we didn't know it was part of the law in the first place. What we're saying is,
if I get a half a dozen different dictionaries, or more, and all of them say basically the same thing, there is a consensus. However they're phrased, they may be phrased somewhat differently, but they all have as a consensus the very meaning that I provided, and none of them imply that this is a philosophical, existential matter of opinion, as you're suggesting. If they all say that I'm right, then what?
Okay, I don't want to be patronizing here, but let me humbly suggest that we buy a book, and it's called the Dictionary of Philosophy.
That would be useful. We do something for free instead, and we can go to One Look Encyclopedia or Dictionary and look up the definition and check and see if every single one of the definitions, every one available anywhere, all agree with me.
Aaron,
and I'm betting that they will, and I'm betting not one will agree with you.
A basic high school textbook, when you open it and the topic is on miracles, you would have varying opinions in Western and Eastern traditions.
But you won't have varying definitions. The definitions are not philosophical. The definitions remain.
Aaron, you have to appreciate, if some people have disagreed with the coherent, if something is incoherent, then they've argued that a certain description, definition of a word, of a concept is incoherent. For example, David Hume had his own view. We had Augustine.
I knew David Hume would come up.
Yeah.
Who's surprised that David Hume came up?
It doesn't matter. I'm elaborating a point. Let me elaborate the point. So the point I'm trying to say is, if you go even to our Western-owned tradition, you see varying views on the philosophy of miracles. It's actually a whole topic.
Okay. Then let's look it up from multiple sources, not just dictionaries. Let's also expand that.
I think we're really getting stacked on this issue way too long.
See if they don't all still.
Please, let's not forget that we do actually have a caller with us, and she is at high school, and she does have high school textbooks, and just want to make a comment.
Actually, in high school, I will be a senior this year. We have not talked about miracles at all. There's been no mention in any of my classes of any of that, but I'm sure that if we did, they would agree with Aaron. Not to be insulting you, by the way.
It's all right.
But I would also like to ask, if it is divinely written, why is there multiple interpretations? Wouldn't there be one interpretation that the divine would let us know is correct? Wouldn't the divine write it as a literal sense so that we wouldn't have to interpret it differently?
Sure.
And therefore have different branches?
Sure.
Okay, before you answer, Hamza, because it's getting very close to the end of the show, Majestic, thank you very much for that question. I think it's a good one to leave us with. I'm going to remove you. Hamza, this is going to be the last thing that we deal with, so please, if you can, address that. If your God can create DNA, why can't he make a book that's easy to understand?
Sure. First of all, I was talking about books. Here's a high school textbook in Britain, and here's a chapter. It's called The Philosophy of Miracles, okay? It's called AS Religious Studies. So just to clarify that point. The second point is, I just bring it back to my original point, which was that when you have human agency, you're going to have these issues. But interestingly, in the Islamic tradition, the Quran is probably, you would argue, the only faith book that actually gives you tools to interpret it, and it appreciates there's going to be a scope of interpretation.
Well, unfortunately, those tools cannot be very well described because there are different interpretations of it.
Yeah, but we don't find
another problem too, and that is the scope of interpretation. The scope is limited, and you're not allowed, you're literally forbidden on pain of death to exceed those boundaries.
No,
that's the problem with the scope of interpretation. What I'm talking about is something completely different. I'm talking about something that is verifiable. Whether you want to believe it or not, you have to concede that it is true. That's where I run.
Yeah, I did verify the linguistics. You guys haven't provided a contention to that. I suggest you do read the work, the inimitablequran.com, and basically investigate for yourself. That's probably your homework for today. The next point I would like to try to make, so there isn't a verifiable sense. I actually even gave you a coherent definition of a miracle as well. Something you said wasn't in a baby textbook.
Where did you give me a coherent definition?
Well, I'll do is I'll send you those links as well, just to make it easy for everyone, yeah?
Well, you have it in front of you?
No, I don't, no.
But I'm sorry, don't want to be pedantic, but you did say that you had actually given a definition.
Yeah.
And now you're saying that you haven't actually given a definition.
No, I have given a definition, yeah.
Maybe somebody else heard it and I missed it.
The definition was an event that lies outside the productive capacity of nature. That was the definition.
Okay, so it's the same thing that I gave you. I told you it would be phrased differently, but they all come up to the same thing. It's a consensus. It's outside the realm of physics, not physically possible. It can neither be accounted for nor explained by science. That makes it physically impossible.
But
and yet it happens anyway.
Your definition is even wrong. It's not even the mainstream definition. The mainstream definition is violations of natural law. That's the
exactly.
We're getting snagged for way too long on the definitions thing. Okay,
really
it's a Deus Ex Machina argument to begin with. There's magic. Aaron, you're just going to have to accept that he believes in magic, and you don't. I think this is really, we're going around in circles.
Yeah, we are, and we're also 36 minutes over our normal end time, and I
can keep going.
Did last week. I mean, if people are happy to continue, then we will do.